Thank you to Dorothy and Wesley and Pastor Natalie and Courtney as well. Who do we choose to be? This seems to be at the heart of Jesus' message here in Matthew's gospel. Those who find their life will lose it, but those who lose their life for my sake will find it. It's not your warm and fuzzy love message that we're used to from Jesus. This isn't the Jesus we know and like. This Jesus didn't come to offer peace, but a sword. With a Father's Day sermon like this, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that sons and fathers will become estranged, family members turning against one another, in-laws, households. Who do we choose to be? That's also the title of Margaret Wheatley's book on leadership in times of disruption, her message being much the same when times are uncertain and anxious. Who do we want to be? As the president and founder of the Berkana Institute, she experiments with organizational theories that center on how living systems organize, adapt, and change. Will we hunker down in preservation mode like animals tend to do when they're threatened, or will we choose to be more enlightened than that, willing to use our power and influence to create and make space for change? Who do we choose to be? It's a question the Israelite leader Joshua asked his people as they settled into the promised land. Previous to that, they'd been liberated by God after generations of oppression at the hands of Egyptian slavery. And then they wandered for another generation in the wilderness. They overcame daunting odds against new enemies in the land when only Joshua and one other leader believed they could, when the rest of the people in leadership were afraid and wanted to hunker down or retreat. And after all of this, Joshua gives this speech to the people. He says, "Now revere the Lord and serve God with sincerity and faithfulness. If you are unwilling, or if serving God is undesirable to you, or in the Hebrew, it says, if serving God is evil to you, then choose this day who you will serve. The gods of your ancestors in the region of Egypt, or the gods of this land that they were moving into. But as for me and my household," he says, "we will serve the Lord." Who do we choose to be? It's a question that lives on in Texas lore, carved in the dirt in San Antonio. The Texans had overtaken this property that was not theirs. When they gained control of the Alamo in pursuit of freedom and something more just, now outnumbered 15-1 by the Mexican army, Colonel William Travis gave a speech from inside its walls. He took out his sword and he drew a line in the sand, and he implored the people to choose, cross over the line and stand with him and face certain death, or remain on the other side of the line and surrender or retreat, both of which would also result in death. The story is more legend than history, but it lives on like the memory of their courage at the Alamo, because against all odds, they chose to fight and stand for something greater than themselves. Who do we choose to be? Jesus is asking. It's not a typical love message of Jesus. He came not to bring peace, he says, but a sword. Family members turned against one another, households, maybe even congregations. What do we do with his violent language? Why would he speak this way? I've been wondering this week if Jesus employs military imagery because that's the only context in which we understand courage or tend to value valor. We know what it means to draw a line in the sand in battle, to want to choose the side of the good guys, whoever we're convinced they are. But Maybe Jesus uses language of violence in order to shock us into hearing his message about love. You think fighting a war is courageous? Try waging the internal battle of loving someone else instead. Because love really isn't those warm and fuzzy feelings we romanticize in the movies. Jesus' call to love is the laborious, messy kind of love, the kind that requires something of us. Jesus isn't advocating for war or violence or even peace as we often understand it. He's admitting that his way of living, that following his way, like we profess in our mission statement as a church, it's costly. He's warning us that loving our neighbor sounds more like crucifixion than kumbaya. To the zero-sum survival of the fittest, manifest destiny philosophies of our time, loving our neighbor looks more like losing, not winning. And some might say, how sad. And Jesus says, this is the way. Who do we choose to be? Jesus is asking us, who has our allegiance? Who has our allegiance? Is it your family, your country, your nation, your business, your bank account, your political party? When you're confronted with making a decision, which way do you lean? For Christians, he's suggesting that following his way of loving others will require decisions so difficult that sometimes we'll feel like we're on the wrong side, even in opposition to our own families and friends. And still, Jesus says that even a sparrow's life matters to him, that every hair on our head matters to him, that every life matters to him. So why are we afraid of fighting for those whose lives don't seem to matter to a society? When we look at our laws and policies and practices and preferences and privileges and proximity to power, of what, of whom are we afraid? Other people's opinions, losing our perch at the top, being too political in a sermon. For Jesus, love is not easy. It isn't straightforward. It's a winding and bumpy journey through wilderness and up against daunting foes. Love isn't easy, but it's good. It's necessary. It's the currency of God's economy, one that doesn't commoditize lives or assimilate cultures or oppress people, but celebrates diversity and codifies justice. Love gives itself away, and it's zero sum. It never runs out. It's risky, and it doesn't offer much in the way of self-rewards. It demands something of us. It demands us. Whoever finds their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life will find it. Jesus says love is only love if we're involved in it. It's why those of us with power or benefits in society can feel like justice is stripping something away from us, or that it's unfair, because we've been trained to believe that our inherent individual rights are more valuable and important than the inherent individual rights of others, of the collective good. So if justice is what love looks like in public, then it costs something of many of us. It demands we let go of some things in order for others to have some too. We have to be willing to lose our lives in order to find them, in order for us to find others' lives. Maybe that's how we actually find our own life, is when we see others. Who do we choose to be as individuals, as a nation who's overwhelmingly saying in this moment that Black lives matter, that trans lives matter, who's currently celebrating Pride Month and remembering how it started, who do we choose to be as individuals, as a nation, as a congregation? We must choose. That's what Jesus is saying. So who's it going to be?